The sampling was how you choose the group you're going to study, basically. So we're going to talk about the studies today. So the sampling, we did convenience, which is where it's convenient to get the people you're going to talk to. We did self-selected. That's going to be if you're volunteering to do something or you're responding to something that somebody maybe sends you a survey or something, you're choosing to respond to it. There's systematic. That's where you ask like every third person something. And then there's random, like everybody's name goes in a hat and I randomly draw out everybody's equally likely. Those are the sampling methods. There are 3 study methods, so those are the ones we're going to do right now. Okay, the first one, the first blank here, it just says in an observational study. Okay, observational study. All you're going to do is you're literally just going to observe. You're not going to interact with whatever you're observing. You're just going to observe and you're going to record information. And then this one says you measure or observe members of a sample in such a way that they are not affected by the study. So like I said, you're not actually asking them questions or influencing them in any way. You're just going to observe whatever's going on and write down what you observe. Okay, the second one is called, it says this should be controlled, and then experiment. Okay, and you guys have probably heard of these. A controlled experiment, what's going to happen is you're going to divide, however you decide to sample the people, you're going to divide them into 2 groups. One of the groups you're going to give some kind of treatment to or affect them in some kind of way. The other group you're not going to give the treatment to, and then you're going to compare the results. The group you don't give anything to, that's called the control group. The group you do give something to, that's where a lot of times they'll do like a medication with this type of a study. They'll give one group the medication, the other group they'll give a placebo, which doesn't affect us, like a sugar pill. We'll talk about that in one of the examples here in a minute. But controlled experiment, 2 groups. One group gets some kind of treatment, the other one does not, and then you compare. All right, and the third one is literally just a survey. So it's going to say in a survey. So like a Google form or something like that, you're going to send people questions. And it does say you send everybody in the sample a set of questions. It could just be that you just ask one question. It doesn't have to be like 300 questions. It could just be one question. It could be 2 questions. It could be 50 questions. But a survey is you're sending somebody, or maybe you walk up to them and like ask them in person, but you're just asking questions. Okay, now in this one, this is going to say a poorly designed study. So if we don't do a good job setting this up, these are all methods we can use, but if we don't think them through and set them up well, if we have a poorly designed study, that can result in unreliable, I'm just going to write stats, but it's unreliable statistics. I'm just going to abbreviate that. If we don't do a good study, we can't really use the results to make any kind of conclusions about anything. All right, so we got to decide if we did a good job setting up our study to decide if the results are actually worth looking at or applying to a general population. Now, this says if a study is well designed, you can assume the results represent the entire population. So not just your sample, but the entire population. And then if you do have a good study, you determine that you got good information, you can make general conclusions or inferences about an entire population. So if you've got a good study, your sample gives you whatever information, you can make that conclusion for the general population. Okay, so I'm going to scooch this up just a little bit. For each one of these, I just have a bunch of different situations here. It says what type of study method is being described. So those are the 3 we talked about today. And then should these statistics actually be used to make any kind of conclusions about the population in general? All right, so this one says researchers randomly chose 2 groups from 10 volunteers. Over a period of 8 weeks, one group eats ice cream before they go to sleep, The other does not. Volunteers wear monitoring devices while sleeping, and researchers record their dream activity. Okay, what kind of method am I using from those three at the top? This is a control, because you're splitting them into two groups. One group's eating ice cream, one's not. So one's imposing the treatment would be people eating ice cream. Not imposing anything would be the people that don't. So this is a controlled experiment. Okay, now, if they get results from this, like let's say all the people that ate ice cream before bed ended up having nightmares, and that's what they measured on their heart monitors that they hooked them up to. What would that be something that I should make a conclusion about for a general population? Like, is this a well-designed study that we should use the information we get out of this to make general conclusions about the whole population? Exactly. I would say, I mean, you could probably find some information, but I would say this is probably not a good idea just for the sheer fact you are only working with 10 people. Okay, there's really, really small sample size to make a general conclusion about a population if you're only working with 10 people. Not enough people here. Now, that doesn't mean it doesn't follow. It's still a controlled experiment. It's just not a good design here. Let me ask you, see if you can remember from yesterday. So there were 4 types of sampling methods. We had convenience, self-selected, systematic, and random. Which sampling method is being used here? If I get my sample from people volunteering for this. Which one of the sampling methods? Do you remember from yesterday which one? Self-selected, yes. I know it doesn't ask you that, but I'm just going to see if I can remind you guys of those words today. So this is self-selected. Anytime people volunteer to do stuff, that's self-selected because they're volunteering themselves, so they're selecting themselves. Okay. This one says students in a science class, and maybe you did, I did this in 3rd grade, maybe you did too. Record the height of bean plants as they grow. Like maybe you put a little seed in a plastic cup and put it on a windowsill in your classroom. I don't know, that's what I did. But what would this one be if I just observe, or I just like measure the heights of these plants as they grow? This one's observational. Okay. Now, would these be decent statistics to make a conclusion about how bean plants grow? Yeah. I think this would be decent. Yeah. Now, what I might add to that, so maybe if I was doing this in a classroom in Indiana, it would be different than if I was doing this in a classroom in like Arizona. So I would say here, I would say this is decent, but depends on what population that you're talking about. If you were saying, like I just mentioned, like if you were saying this is for the state of Indiana, I want to look at this, that would probably be pretty good. If I was saying this is for the whole country, I would say maybe we should involve some more schools and collect and compile the data a little bit more. But I think that would be a good study. Okay. Here is my next one. All right, this one says, and I'm going to ask you if you can remember, like, how are we getting our sample here? What is our sample method for this one, too? This is a review from yesterday. It says student council members ask every 10th student in the lunch line if they like the cafeteria food. Do you guys remember from yesterday? If I ask every 10th person, this, well, it could, you could argue that, but it's a little bit more specific since it says every 10th person. Do you guys remember which one that was? Yes. I have a horrible time saying it. This is, oh, I can't even spell it. Systematic. If we do every 10th person or every 3rd person, I'm measuring people at regular intervals. So if you do every 10th person, that's the systematic. Okay, now, which method from today? Am I doing observational, controlled experiment, or survey? This is a survey because you're just going to ask the people a question. Okay, now, would this be a decent way to find out if, in general, the people in your school like the cafeteria food? Why not? What's wrong with that?
Well, I feel like, I know some people on the don't like the lunch food, but if you don't get lunch line, some people probably like it.
Right. What might be, exactly, what else might be wrong with this? If I ask every 10th person in line if they like what they're serving at lunch, am I underrepresenting any group?
You're representing the people who pack their lunch.
Yeah, exactly. So if I'm trying to maybe make this conclusion about everybody in the whole school, I didn't ask anybody that packed. I just asked people in lunch line. So I would say, in an argument there, that this is probably not the greatest way to do this. Now, if I asked every 10th person that walked into the cafeteria, that would be a different story. But if I'm only asking people in line, you're creating a bias there because you're only asking people who actually buy the school lunch. So maybe you're more likely to buy lunch if you like it. I don't know. So I would just say you're underrepresenting anybody that packs their lunch there. So that's not the greatest. I probably would not use the statistics here. Okay. Now, this one says, pharmaceutical company asked for volunteers to test a new drug to treat high blood pressure. The volunteers are randomly assigned to two groups. One group will receive the new drug. The other group will receive a placebo. I think I mentioned this earlier, but a placebo is literally like a sugar pill. So they make the people think they're taking the medication, but they're really just taking it's not going to affect them in any way. That way they can compare the two groups. And it says the researchers will monitor blood pressure of the volunteers for 6 weeks. Okay. See if you can tell me which sample method am I using here? How am I getting my sample here? It says we're going to have people volunteer to take this medication. Then we're going to split it into two groups. What kind of sample am I looking at? This, anytime it's volunteers, they're volunteering themselves, so they're selecting themselves. So this is self-selected. Okay, now what type of study are we doing here? This is controlled because we're going to split them into two groups. Okay. Now, do we think we're going to study these people for 6 weeks? Half of them take the medication, half of them don't. They're going to compare. Do you think the statistics here would be valid to make a conclusion about a population?
I think more information. There's no, like, you don't know how many people are in these groups.
Yeah, okay, I completely agree with that. This could be okay, but you definitely need more information. It doesn't tell us, like, how many people. What else might be something that you would want to look at if you were asking to see if a blood pressure medication would work? Like, what other factors might you want to know? Because they just tell us volunteers. They don't tell us anything. Yeah, like, are you giving this to somebody that has low blood pressure? That's probably not a good deal. Like, do these people have, do you have, like, high blood pressure? Is that why you're volunteering? I would say maybe another factor. I mean, we could do age, we could do the gender, we could do a bunch of different things that would affect maybe if somebody would have high blood pressure or not. And we're not really addressing that with the description that we've got there. So this is like a good start, but they need to be more specific about how they're picking these people. Okay, is anybody having a question? A lot of these are just like, if you want to have your opinion and just defend it, that's fine. You just give me some reasons. We could have totally different opinions as long as you can defend what you're thinking. Because a lot of times you could pick apart any of these and say, this is not good enough because, or I think this is pretty good because. So it's just your opinion. Now, this last one's kind of tricky. Okay, this says, in a study conducted at a high school in California, researchers compared the scholastic performance, so that's like your academic performance, of music students with that of non-music students. So people that would be in choir, show choir, band, orchestra, that stuff, with students that are not participating in any kind of instrument or voice or anything like that. Okay, it says the music students had a much higher GPA than the non-music students, 3.59 compared to 2.91. And it says on top of that, 16% of the music students had all A's compared to only 5% of the non-music students. What method am I using here to get that data? This is just observation. It's not, we're not splitting people into, it kind of feels like that because it's two groups. There's music people and non-music people, but we're not imposing a treatment on either one of them. We're just observing their GPAs and how many A's they have. So this is just observational. Okay, now, should you use this, like to me, if I'm reading that information, that would say, okay, the kids that are involved in music in this school seem to have higher GPAs, and there's a larger group of these people that have all A's. Would this be something where I would say, okay, if you're in music, obviously you're going to have a better grade point average. Do you think that would be valid here?
This music class doesn't have to be very.
Exactly. Okay, that's the statistics for this school. I would say, I would probably say on this one, not really, honestly. This is one high school in California. It doesn't tell us anything about the high school. Maybe it's a performing arts high school and they specifically want people that are in the music program or whatever, things like that. So there's just not enough information here. And this is one school in California. Maybe if I did the same observation at a school in Indiana, it would be totally different. You just don't know. There's just not enough information here, I would say again. And you could, in this, I would say not enough of a sample. You're just doing one high school out of all the high schools in the country. I would say there's too small of a number to make a conclusion about a population in general here. Now, if I wanted to say for that specific school, I might be able to say, okay, maybe you're a little bit more likely to have a higher GPA if you're involved in music, but only for that specific school, not for a general population of high school students. Okay, now the very last one is to kind of just design a survey question. We're just going to do this real quick. I promise it's not bad. It says, during the 2008 Olympic Games, a U.S. swimmer won more medals than any other swimmer in history. Doesn't tell you anything else about that person. Okay, it says, what sampling method could you use to find the percent of students in your school, so the population would be people that go to Homestead, who recognize this swimmer from a photograph? What is an example of a survey question that is likely to yield information that has no bias? Okay, so you're going to have a picture of this person and you're going to be able to ask a question, and you don't want to be biased and you want to just get a general feel for how many people would know who this person was. Does anybody know who this person is? You guys might be too young, I don't know. Swimmer that won, do you know? Are you raising your hand?
I was just
Okay, this is supposed to be Michael Phelps. Okay, so this is a real person. Okay, but if you don't, that's okay. So maybe
Phelps. We actually knew that, but he just said it, and then it reminded me.
He really just said it and reminded me. Okay. Anyway, okay, so maybe what would be a good way that I could kind of get a sample of all the people that go to school here? Okay, good. Okay, so good. Go to every class and randomly pick 2 people. Perfect. Okay, we could definitely do that. Does anybody think that like a different way that we could get a sample?
I just want to ask if I'm 17.
Well, but they'd be part of the population, right?
Ah.
So they would still, but we could still include them in our group. But if we randomly picked and maybe a swimmer ended up, they'd be more likely to be able to answer that question for sure. But we wouldn't want to exclude them just because they're on the swim team, because then we're underrepresenting them in the population.
Okay.
That's a really good thought, though. What's maybe, like, other than just like, if I walk to every class and pick 2 people, what's maybe like another way I could sample everybody to get, or to get a good population for the school? Yeah, okay. Every 10th person on like on a complete list. There's different ways you can do this. Both of those are perfect. The first one, we're doing more of a random. The second one, that's an example of a more of a systematic. We really wouldn't want to do we would not want to stand outside a summit and ask people walking out of the pool, right? That would be a convenience one, but that would not be a good representation. Both of these would be really, really good. Okay, how would you, so remember, you have a picture of this person. How would you maybe ask the question so it wasn't biased? Just hold up the picture and say, perfect. Just hold up the picture, say, who is this? All right, you wouldn't say like, who is this swimmer? Who is this Olympian? Because then that's giving it a bias and maybe giving the people a hint to who the person is. So you have to be, when you make these questions, you got to kind of almost try to be vague about it so you get the response from them that's not in a biased way. Is anybody having a question? Okay, I just passed back the homework to you, so it's just on that paper. Remember, a lot of these, now, what sampling method or what type of study we're doing, that's not your opinion. That's going to actually be an answer for the question. But whether you think the statistics would be valid or not, as long as you can defend your answer, I will take it, okay? So as long as you understand